Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and another tutorial. Today I am going to sew along with you the Apothecary handbag by Sincerely Jen. This is the small size. This is also our August 2022 class. In that class, on the membership side, I will be making the large size. Let me show you some of the amazing features about this bag. So it has this amazing front panel, which is so much fun for fussy cutting if you wanted to do it. It has two large pockets, whoops, on the front. They go like fairly deep down. On the back, you have a large slip pocket. It's kind of almost hidden in that print. A somewhat round bottom, optional crossbody strap. I did handbag handles on this one. You could also do them as a shoulder strap. The pattern provides both of the instructions for that. A recessed zipper, and on the inside you have a zipper pocket. I've done my typical zipper pocket with overlay. Nothing on the other side, but it would be super easy to add in a slip pocket if you wanted it. This was just such a fun make, and it was actually fairly fast. Materials in this bag, I have this vinyl here is from Fantastic Customs Fabrics. My faux leather is from Galaxy Customs. This is the Loon Black. My hardware is all from Emmaline bags. My zippers and zipper pulls are from Blue Calla. Minimal interfacing in this bag. The pattern calls for Deckable Light. I substituted Deckable Light for EB Fuse Heavy from Emmaline bags, as well as I have a piece of Deckable Heavy in the bottom of the bag. My lining, I have a waterproof canvas from Fabricville, and besides that, that's all that really goes into this bag. It is a really fun sew. I can't wait to get into the tutorial to show you everything that is involved. Yeah, so why don't we get to it? Okay, rivets, number 5 zipper tape, 4 rectangular rings, a slider, 2 swivel clasps, a zipper end, 4 number 5 zipper pulls, optional purse feet, optional strap ends, and I almost forgot, either 2 D-rings or 2 triangle rings like these. Okay, so here's my typical overlay I put in all of my bags. Your top panels, I did all of mine in exterior fabric, 2 backed with EB Fuse Heavy. My bottom pieces, my lining piece is backed with EB Fuse Heavy. My exterior has Deckable Heavy outside of the seam allowances. My 2 main lining pieces, both backed with EB Fuse Heavy, one with the zipper box out of the interfacing. 4 zipper panel pieces, 2 exterior and 2 lining. Okay, so my lining pockets for the front pockets, you're going to follow your pattern piece. You're going to cut 2 at the top, 2 at the medium line, and 2 at the small line. These are done, I have mine done in wax and waterproof canvas. Your exterior front and back pieces are next. So this is my back pieces, A and C. And my front pieces, I have fussy cutted them, so here's my front A, B, and C. My zipper pocket for my interior zipper pocket lining pieces. My handle pieces. 4 connector pieces. So right here on my handle, the last one was the crossbody pieces, 2 crossbody connector pieces. And then you have your side, you want 2 sets of the sides cut mirrored to one another. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I am going to do my crossbody strap and my handles off camera. If you need a class for how to do that, it's down below in the description. Okay, so let's work on our back slip pockets. You're going to take your A pieces of both the lining and the exterior, put them right sides together, and we're going to sew across that top with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now we're going to flip these wrong sides together. I'm going to finger press them really good and hold that seam with clips, and then go ahead and top stitch that with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so that is done. Now we are going to work on the next part of it. So you're going to take your exterior C and your lining piece that is the full width, I believe it was, of the bag. We are going to find our centers. Make sure they're orientated properly and put them right sides together like so. It's okay if they hang over a little bit and sew across here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You will have the little triangle hangovers. That is making it so we will have a nice straight line once we fold this seam allowance out. So now what we want to do is we want to press this so the seam is pointing up towards that pattern piece C part, and top stitch along the exterior piece with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold that seam in place. Okay, so that is done, and we have the other piece that we had done. Now we're just going to line these up, matching up that bottom seam that we had just completed, and clip that in place. So this is creating that back slip pocket. So I'm just going to put a couple clips just to hold them in place on the top of each side. Then we're going to flip this exterior piece out of the way and clip the lining pieces together like so. And then we're going to sew just through the lining pieces with a 3/4 of an inch seam allowance, making sure you are not sewing that exterior piece. Coco says, hi everybody. Okay, and then you can trim that seam allowance down to about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And then go ahead and baste the other two sides. So that is our slip pocket complete. Now we're going to work on the sides. So you want to take one set of the sides mirrored to one another, and where that kind of notch is on the inside part, you're going to line that up with the top of the panel and then follow the curve down, clipping it together. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and sew down these sides. Okay, so now we want to flip this out so the seam allowance is going towards the side, and then we are going to top stitch through the side panel to hold that seam in place. And repeat with the other side. Okay, so that's all done. That is back panel complete. That was fast. So set that aside for now. And now we are going to work on our front panel. So you're going to use front panel A, find the lining piece that is the same size. Now I'm going to use double-sided tape. If your machine does not like double-sided tape, go ahead and use clips. My lining piece is right side up. I've put some double-sided tape along the top. Also along the top of my exterior piece, double-sided tape. I'm now going to take my zipper, making sure my zipper pull is right side up and closing to the right, and stick that down to that tape. Take my front panel A and put it right sides together with this, sandwiching that zipper tape. Okay, so now I'm going to put on my zipper put. This is going to help me get a nice straight zipper when we sew that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Trust me, when doing zippers, it's worth the effort to change into your zipper foot. So I'm using my right zipper foot here. And then I'm going to sew this together with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to fold these wrong sides together. I've gone and given mine a little bit of a press with my iron from the lining side, and then we're going to sew through that seam right at the top here with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Coco says hi again. I'm going to trim up my zipper tape because I cut it a little bit too long here. I apologize for Coco. There's somebody on the sidewalk, but there's not much I can do about it. Sorry. All right, so here is my next main panel piece B. I am going to go ahead along the bottom of this and put some zipper tape. Again, use clips if your machine does not like zipper tape, or not zipper tape, double-sided tape. And we are going to put it right sides together with the unsewn side of our zipper tape nice and centered. Now I'm going to show you this a little bit different. I am going to show you how it's written in the pattern. In the pattern, they suggest going ahead and basting this on first with about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to do my other zipper similar to what I did with the bottom of the zipper, but I just wanted to show you how it is written in the pattern, just to cause, in case it's caused any confusion how I am doing it. So I'm showing you both ways of doing it. So now that that's done, I've got my lining piece, and I'm putting double-sided tape along there. Again, use clips if you want to, and then go ahead in that seam that we just sewn, go ahead and clip or stick these together like so, making sure that they're nice and even. You're going to see that our lining piece says do not line up. That is okay. And then go ahead and sew this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Using double-sided tape, I find it easy to do this step as one step, but I just wanted to show you how to do it as 2 steps. Okay, so now I'm just going to flip up that exterior piece, not the lining piece, just that exterior piece B, and top stitch that in place. So the lining piece is still facing towards the bottom. It's not being caught in this top stitching. Okay, so you can see they're different lengths. That's okay. So now you're going to take your other large piece and your small piece you have left, and we are going to rinse and repeat what we did with the first half of that last zipper. We're putting tape or clips along the top of each of these. We are working with the larger pocket piece first, making sure your zipper pull is closing to the right. Stick your zipper tape or clip your zipper tape on. Both of these are right side up. Take your other panel and put it right sides together like so. And then sew across this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, then once again, fold these together right sides together like so, giving it a good press at the iron on from the lining side, and go ahead and top stitch that seam in place. So this is the bottom of the second zipper. And then just like we did with the top of the last section, we're going to do the same with this section. So it's our shorter piece. Once again, I'm using double-sided tape along the top of this one and the bottom of this one. The only thing different, I'm going to do these in one go. So I have my lining piece right side up and my almost completed exterior piece right side up. Taking my pattern piece C, putting it right sides together like so, and then sewing across here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. It's okay, nothing is lining up. We'll trim that up later. You just want to make sure your exterior pieces are definitely lined up. And then once again, you're going to fold that top exterior piece up. The lining piece will stay facing towards the bottom, and you are going to top stitch just through that exterior piece to hold that seam in place. Okay, so now we can close up our zipper panels. So take that first zipper panel here, you want to trim them up as close as you can like this and clip them in place. And do the same with the other zipper pocket underneath. Trim it up. Now I made a mistake here. See how I flipped it over? So my zipper isn't laying flat. So even though it looks like I'm cutting them straight and even, I am not, because when I flip it back over and I flatten out that zipper, the one piece is going to be longer, and you're going to see that right here. And we're going to sew these with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So as you can see, I flipped it up and my zipper wasn't straight, so I straightened it out. And you can see my one is a little bit longer than the other. So I'm just going to take that into account, and then from the shorter piece, so across with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So yes, definitely when you pin those and trim them up, make sure that your zippers are sitting nice and flat. And then with the other one, again, a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I do like to keep my mistakes in just in case you guys make similar mistakes and then it doesn't throw you for a loop. Okay, so now you're going to go ahead and trim these seam allowances of those zipper pockets down to about 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And then go ahead and trim up those lining panels so they are nice and even with our exterior panels. And then go ahead and baste that with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way around those 3 sides. Or sorry, not the bottom side just yet, just the 2 diagonal sides. Now is a good time to put in your zipper panel or your nameplate. I have measured up about 2 inches and installed it just through the exterior. Now to complete our front panel, you want to put the sides on exactly like we did with the back. So go ahead and repeat that as I've done here, and it's done. Now we're going to prepare our connectors. So you're going to take your 4 connectors. I have drawn a line down the middle of each at 1 inch. I'm going to use some double-sided tape. You can do this with a domestic machine as well, as the tape will be mainly outside of our stitching lines. You can also hold this together with clips if you prefer. So you're going to go ahead and fold those long edges into that center line for all 4 of these, and then top stitch down each of the folded edges with 1/8 of an inch top stitch. I'm going to go ahead and chain stitch these to save on thread and cutting and time. Coco is very vocal. She is once again saying, "Hey, everybody." Okay, so now that that's done, I put a little bit of double-sided tape on the end of one of the short ends. I'm taking my rectangular rings and I am going to fold these connectors wrong sides together in half, matching up that bottom line. If you don't want to use double-sided tape, you can definitely go ahead and hold this with a clip. Now to make our crossbody strap connectors, it's pretty much the same process, except for we are not going to be doing any top stitching at this point. So you're going to take those long edges and fold them into those center lines. Then you're going to take your D-ring or your triangle ring like I have here. I'm going to take a little bit more double-sided tape and put it up about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom of one short end. Take my triangle ring, fold this over about halfway and the bottom about halfway, like so, and then just hold that together with a clip. So both raw edges of the short ends are in the back. Okay, so now for our rectangular rings, you want to put these so the hardware is facing down and just line it up right before where our side joins, and then you're going to baste these in place. Very easy placement for these connectors, as you're just butting them right up against the seam where our sides meet our main panel on the front and the back. Okay, so that is done. Now we're going to take our top panels, take the two that you have your EB Fuse Heavy or your Decovil Light on, make sure they're situated in the correct orientation. Find your top and bottom centers. I just do little snips in mine by folding it in half. Now it's the longest edge you want to be centered here, right sides together. Match up that center mark and clip all the way across. And go ahead and top stitch along here with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Do the same with the front panel as well. Once again, I am switching into my right zipper foot mainly because we are going to be sewing so close to the hardware. So this just makes it so you get a nice and even stitch line and you don't accidentally run over your hardware. I'm going nice and slow where my hardware is just to make sure it isn't in the way. But when you're doing this, you're going to feel how your zipper foot goes really close to where the rectangular ring is. And that is what we want. Okay, so now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and we want our seam allowance here to be pointing towards the bottom of the bag. And the reason for that is it's going to make our connectors, it's going to stabilize our connectors to make them so they point up. So we are top stitching along that seam through the bottom part of the bag, not through that top panel. And you can see here how close that stitching is to that rectangular ring. So go ahead and do that with the other panel as well. Okay, so that is all done. They're both done. I've actually went and put some rivets back with little scraps of Decovil Heavy behind the posts for some added stability. Now we are going to put these right sides together. You want to match up our seams that we had just sewn so they're nice and even, so our bag will have a nice fluid line all the way across those top panels. And you're going to clip down the sides on each side, again matching up where that top panel meets that bottom panel. Then we're going to sew down these with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm now changing back into my standard foot. I don't need my zipper foot anymore. I changed my feet out many times during the bag making process between these two feet. They're my favorite feet to use. All right, so that is all done. You can go ahead and trim this down to an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm taking my rectangular rings and I'm actually measuring down about a 3/4 of an inch from that folded line. And this is because I'm going to be sewing across these lines and putting some rivets in. On the back side of these, I am putting some double-sided tape outside of the seam allowances. This is going to help hold these connectors in place because we are going to be sewing in a loop here. So right where that seam one of the seams that we just sewn is nice and centered, we want to center this connector with that and lining the fold up with where the top panel meets the bottom panel like so. And then go ahead and sew along that square there. You can go nice and close to your hardware if you want to. I'm going about 3/4 of an inch down because I'm going to put a rivet above and below that 3/4 inch line. If you're going to sew nice and close to your hardware, make sure that you have your zipper foot on so you can get close to your hardware. Also, what you see me doing here is I don't like having that backstitch line, so I pulled my thread long and I have pulled my top thread through for the starting. Continued sewing. Here I'm putting a piece of scrap vinyl behind my walking foot just to save my vinyl so it doesn't eat it up. And then when I come back to that starting hole, I'm going to hand crank, making sure my needle lands in that starting hole. Pull my threads long once again. Cut those, pull on the bobbin thread to pull that top thread through, pull it through, and then tie those 4 strands in 3 or 4 knots. Again, you don't have to do this. This is just my preference. You can definitely go ahead and backstitch it if you prefer. What this does is doesn't give it that buildup of the backstitch line on the front side of the bag. So I've now done that with both of my connectors, and I've put 2 rivets in each side backed with Decovil heavy scraps. And now it's time for the bottom. Now how I do it in this, I am going to actually add in my optional purse feet. So I'm going to do one in the middle here. This is not part of the pattern. This is just what I want to do. And I found for the small bag, the one in the middle, and then measuring in about 1.5 inches up. And 1.5 inches in from the side was good placement for my purse feet. You can decide what you like if you decide to put the purse feet in. So once I have my markings drawn, I'm going to go ahead and install my purse feet. If you need a class on how to install purse feet, there is a class down below in the description for you. Okay, so now let's find the center of our long side of our bottoms and the short sides of our bottoms. Now doing this again, I would do it differently than how I'm going to show you here because this piece is almost rectangular with curved corners. When I go to attach this onto the bag, I would definitely go ahead and sew the long sides first and then go back in and do the curved sides. I will be showing how to do that in class for this because I think it'll be easier. In this tutorial, I just went ahead and I matched up my centers and then sewed all the way around all at one time. But if you're worried about those corners, definitely after you've matched up your centers and you have this all clipped in place, do the straight sides first and then go back in and do the short sides, and you will probably find that that will make things a little bit easier. But definitely match up the 4 center marks first before you go in clip, and then you can sew this bottom on depending on what your preference is, whether doing it like I'm going to do in the video by sewing all the way around at once, or going ahead and sewing the 2 long sides first and then going back in and doing the corners. When it comes to doing a rounded bottom, all that I can really suggest is just take it nice and slow. And use a million clips like I'm doing here. Some people like to use staples, or some even like to hand base. So you can definitely go ahead and decide how you want to secure this in place so it will not move during the sewing process. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and sew all the way around here with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. One thing that is nice with this pattern, because we don't really have any interfacing on the exterior of the bag, when it comes to doing this rounded bottom, it is actually kind of easier because the outside isn't as structured, so it's more movable, if that makes sense. So you can move the fabric out of the way a lot easier than, say, if these were heavily interfaced pieces, which I'm thinking is probably what Jen was thinking when she wrote this, because the interfacing is actually on the lining side of the bag, which is what is going to give this bag its structure. The larger seam allowance definitely helps as well with the curved bottom, as you have a little bit more space to work with rather than if you only had, say, 1/4 inch, and sometimes making those curves the way the bag moves really makes it hard to do that. So this seam allowance for doing the bottom of this bag is absolute perfection. Okay, so that is done. So you can go ahead and you can trim your seam allowance around here. I did mine to about 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so once that is all done, go ahead and turn your exterior right side out and admire the work, your work for the exterior part of this bag. Hard part is done. Okay, so now we're going to work on our zipper panel. So I like to do this without my zipper pull on. So you are going to measure 1 inch from the bottom of the wrong side of your zipper tape. And what this is going to do with that marked line on the back side is make it easy for when we go to put the zipper pull back on. So I have my zipper pull on here so I can see how I am going to be turning each side of my zipper tape down by I want to say this is a 90-degree angle. So I'm kind of folding it in on itself like so and securing that with pins. And then I'm going to go ahead and just base there with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold them at that angle. So that is now done. I'm going to trim the excess off so my zipper tape is nice and even on each side. Double checking that I have that 1 inch line drawn on the back side of my zipper tape for when I want to put the pull on later. And you can go ahead and take the pull off. Okay, so on our exterior pieces and our lining pieces of our zipper panels, we want to measure in 1 inch from each of the long sides. And then you can either press this if you're not using vinyl, you can use clips if you like. I'm going to go ahead and use some double-sided tape. And I'm going to go ahead and fold this into that 1 inch line on all 4 pieces. So once that is done, I have my lining piece here. On the left-hand side, I am going to make a 1/4 inch mark. I'm going to put some double-sided tape along here. Again, use clips if you don't like tape. I'm going to take my zipper right side up as well, match the 90-degree angle with that 1/4 inch line and stick it down like so. And then I'm going to take my exterior piece and I'm going to put this right sides together, sandwiching that zipper tape, matching up, making sure they're the same length. Now I got down here and I must have cut one piece too long, so I'm just going to unstick one and make these nice and even. It is important our lining and our exteriors are nice and even. I'm going to go ahead and sew across here with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once again, switching into my zipper foot so I get nice and close to my teeth. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to push these panels wrong sides together once sewn. I'm using some double-sided tape to press this nice and tight away from my zipper teeth on both my lining and my exterior sides. If your machine doesn't like tape, definitely go ahead and either secure this with some clips, or if you can iron it from one side, go ahead and give it a good press. Making sure our folded sides of our panels line up, and I'm going to go ahead and baste the bottom of my zipper panel shut and then top stitch up the 2 short sides and along the zipper tape. Now you're going to do the exact same thing with the other side of the panel, but you will find you will be working from the right hand side of our zipper panels, which is what we want. So you'll make that 1/4 inch mark at the right hand side of our zipper tape and go ahead and attach everything the exact same way. So once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and put my zipper pull back on just to make sure we're nice and even. That's where I lined up with that 1 inch line we drew on the back of our zipper tape so it would go on straight. Once you see it's good, pull that zipper pull off, and now fold these panels in half to find the center along that raw edge. Okay, I've already gone ahead and I've done my zipper pocket with the opening in the bottom for turning. If you want to see how I do it with an overlay, go ahead and see the class down below in the description. Okay, so we're going to take our zipper panel. I like my zipper pocket to be at the back of the bag, so I want my curved side of my zipper tape to be facing to the left. You're going to match up the centers. Both of these are right side up. You're going to match up the centers of both the main lining piece and the zipper panel piece. Go ahead and baste that in place. Do the exact same, but will look opposite on the opposite side. Ignore the hole cut in my interfacing. I accidentally cut that rectangle out of both interfacing pieces, which I did not need to do. I only needed it on one side. So now we're going to take our other top panels, which I have also done in my exterior fabric because I want it to be the vinyl that shows above the zipper tape. Find your centers, and just like we did with the exterior, you're going to go ahead and put these right sides together like so. And so across here with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, same with the other side. I've now switched back into my standard walking foot here, my standard foot. I no longer need that zipper foot here. And we're going to sew all the way across. Now once again, I'm going to use my double-sided tape to help me press this. You can definitely just finger press this as well. And we are going to fold just this top panel up like so, so that seam is pointing to the top of the bag, and then go ahead and top stitch through that top panel. You will do the exact same thing with the other lining panel. Okay, now it's going to look like these are opposite, and that's only because when we put them the right sides together, they are going to be the same direction. So when you go to put these together, just like we did with the exterior, make sure you're not sewing through your zipper tape. You are also going to go ahead and sew it with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance rather than what we did before, and we are also going to leave about an 8-inch opening for the small bag in one of the main panel sides when we attach this bottom, and we will sew around that with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance like I've done here, leaving that opening in the bottom of the bag. So it's just really rinse and repeat with the exterior and the lining with a few minor differences. You're then going to take your exterior right side out and your lining wrong side out, put them right sides together, and match up the front and back centers of both panels like so. We're in the home stretch. And then the side seams, we want to match those up as well. So pretty much clipping our quarter sections, and then we will go in between each of those quarter sections, evenly distributing that fabric, clipping both the exterior and the lining pieces together. Okay, now if it falls on my flatbed, I would sew it from the inside of this bag, but I'm going to take this to my cylinder arm machine because it just makes everything so better. I'm wearing my favorite sleep all day t-shirt. It's super oversized, but super comfy for a sewing day. And I'm going to go ahead and sew around here with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So that's done. Make sure everything was caught. You can definitely go ahead and trim the seam allowance. I'm just going to leave it as is. For some reason, I just find it's a little more secure. Then go ahead and turn your bag right side out through that opening that we left in the bottom of the lining. In the pattern, it doesn't have the opening in the bottom of the lining. It's turning through that zipper pocket. You're more than welcome to do that. This just helps save on my carpal tunnel. It's a lot easier to turn, and the way I close it up, it will not leave that ridge in the bottom, or I can close the bottom of the bag up through the zipper pocket like it does in the tutorial. So once you have the outside all pressed out good, go ahead and stick the lining in, and we want to fold in those top panels like so. Kind of I'm using waterproof canvas, so it's a little bit thicker, and I'm going to hold that seam in place, making sure I have it nice and taut, nothing caught in behind that seam, all the way around with clips. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and take this to my cylinder arm and top stitch all the way around with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once again, making sure that your zipper tails are out of the way and not getting caught in that seam. Okay, so that is all done, and now all that we have left to do is close that opening in the bottom of the bag. So go ahead and pull your zipper pocket out, reach in through the opening in the zipper pocket to grab that opening in the bottom of the bag to pull through the zipper pocket. And then go ahead and clip that opening shut. And then we're going to take this to the machine and sew in between those stitch lines at the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to close this up. And now once that's done, go ahead, stuff that in the bag, make sure it definitely closed, you caught everything, and if so, go ahead, make sure your raw edges are turned in on your zipper pocket, clip those folded edges together, and then top stitch this shut. This is how I finish all of my birth bags. Okay, so once that's done, stuff that back inside. And then all you have left to do is to put on your zipper pull by matching up those lines on the back side of our zipper tape. Put on our zipper end and attach your straps. And then we're done.
All right, that's it. That's all. What did you think about that? It's a really fun sew, hey?
yeah, so again, I did have a class for this for the August 2022 classes. So if you would want a slowed down class, you can definitely sign up on the membership side for the Tuesday Thursday group, which is what this would show up in. So the second highest here, if you wanted 8 hours of cut to finish instruction on this. Otherwise, you do have this tutorial. Again, if you like this video, please do give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. And if you'd like to support my channel further, you can always buy me a coffee. That is down below in the description. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.